The Spanish Grand Prix was actually really interesting. Assuming we forget about the fight for first place, that is. Look, Red Bull and Max Verstappen are miles ahead of everyone. He finished well over 20 seconds ahead of the next best car, and honestly, he did it easily. He could have probably pitted again and still won the race. Everyone else is miles away, so there isn't really too much point in breaking down Max's race. He won easily and will continue to do so. Luckily for Mercedes though, their upgrades actually worked, or at least we think they did. There is a few caveats here, and one of the caveats is that Ferrari somehow have gone backwards and they have got a mess of a car at the minute, with Charles Leclerc being exceptionally unhappy with what's going on. He actually said that one hard tyre felt different to another hard tyre. The same compound, the car would feel completely different. And oddly, Aston Martin had a pretty bad weekend, really, with Alonso struggling in qualifying because of a damaged floor, but then he really struggled in the race, which I didn't really expect. But Mercedes, well, they're going to be very happy. In Monaco, Mercedes weren't really able to test their upgrades properly, but Spain was the first chance they could really get a handle on them and get data. It has to be said, their race pace was significantly faster than Ferrari. The only Ferrari up there at the time was Carlos Sainz that could fight them, but Lewis was able to manage his pace and then after the stops, overtake Carlos really easily and pull away from him. They did stop Carlos pretty early, but honestly, Mercedes had plenty of pace in hand on the Ferrari, which has not been the case all season, and they had even more pace in hand over the Aston Martins. Lance Stroll did do a cheeky move on Lewis early in the race, after Lewis had had contact with Lando Norris, but eventually got past him and Lance Stroll didn't really have too much of an answer. We have to give credit to George Russell as well. He came from 12th on the grid, all the way up to 3rd, did some fantastic overtakes, and that just reinforces how good that Mercedes is compared to what it was at the beginning of the season. There's still a long way to go to really gauge its performance, but as we know over the last couple of years, the Mercedes car has been good at some tracks and then really struggled at others. So this doesn't necessarily mean that they're the second quickest team just yet. I just want to talk about how unlucky Lando Norris was. He had damage on the very first corner after contact with Lewis Hamilton. Lewis has beaten him off the line and he's actually passed Lando by the first corner. What's happened is Sainz has tried to go around the outside of Max Verstappen and Max has pushed him wide, which apparently is fine. And Sainz has had to back out of it ever so slightly. So Lewis behind, who is he's ahead of Lando at this point, has also had to slightly back out of it. And the concertina effect, Lando's just caught Lewis's back tyre. Lewis was lucky he didn't get a puncture, but devastating for Lando. He had to pit on lap 1 for a new wing. And ultimately he finished the race in 18th, which is, it's horrible, obviously. The incredible thing is, though, that I thought maybe he would get a few more places back. When he was interviewed before the race and people were saying, you know, after qualifying, they were saying, well, what do you expect? Maybe a podium? He's like, no, hopefully stay in the top 10, because they knew that qualifying was an anomaly and they were going to struggle on race pace because that's been their weakness. So, yes, he had the incident, which has obviously pushed him to the back of the grid, but McLaren are really struggling on race pace at the minute, and that's really what they've got to work on. I briefly mentioned it earlier, but I suppose we have to talk about Charles Leclerc. He started from the pit lane after a really bad qualifying where he said something was wrong with the car, and in his defense, it seems like the data does back that up. He said he was losing time in every left-hander because of a problem with the car. They changed the rear end overnight, changing the gearbox as well, so he started from the pit lane. But in the race, he still struggled and he didn't really move forward. He gained a couple of positions, but ultimately ended up in P11, not even in the points. And when he was asked if he was happy with it after the race, of course he said, no, absolutely not. And it seems Ferrari have got a real issue with their car at the minute. Sure, they've brought upgrades, but their race pace is not there. And that car, well, it's a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde. I just wanted to talk about the layout changes to Spain as well and whether it improved the racing. I actually think it did. I think the high-speed section now flowing onto the back straight really improved the overtaking because cars were able to follow closer at a higher speed, so DRS was more effective down the straight. Yes, most of the overtaking was into turn 1. Yes, it was DRS aided, I appreciate. But I do think it at least gave us more overtaking opportunities, which is, which is what we want. I think the race itself was quite interesting because different cars were going on different strategies. We saw a couple of cars starting on mediums, most started on soft, but then some went to the hard, some went soft. I actually think for the first time, we didn't just have a nailed on one stop medium hard. which was actually really interesting. I don't expect to get that every weekend, but it was good to see. I enjoyed the Spanish Grand Prix. We have to forget first place because that's Max Verstappen, and I don't think anyone is going to come close in terms of performance to the Red Bull this season. I think they're going to have to throw it away for someone else to get a win. But I enjoyed the race. And Canada, I love that track, so I'm really, really looking forward to Canada. Hope you enjoyed this very quick recap of the Spanish Grand Prix. I'll see you next time.